We are turning, Lord, to hear you, are merciful and kind, slow to anger, rich in blessing, and with love to us incline. The Holy Gospel according to John, the 9th chapter. Jesus heals a man born blind, provoking a hostile reaction that he regards as spiritual blindness to the things of God. The gospel speaks. As Jesus walked along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, "Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" Jesus answered, "Neither this man nor his parents sinned. He was born blind so that God's works might be revealed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world." When he had said this, he spat on the ground, and he made mud with the saliva and spread the mud on the man's eyes, saying to him, "Go, wash in the pool of Siloam," which means sent. Then he went and washed and came back able to see. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar began to ask, "Is this not the man who used to sit and beg?" And some were saying, "It is he." Others were saying, "No, but it's somebody like him." And he kept saying, "I am he." But they kept saying, "How were your eyes opened?" He answered, "The man called Jesus made mud, spread it on my eyes, and said to me, 'Go to Siloam and wash.' Then I went and washed and received my sight." And they said to him, "Where is he?" And he said, "I do not know." They brought to the Pharisees this man who had formerly been blind. Now it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. The Pharisees also began to ask him how he had received his sight. He said to them, "He put mud on my eyes, then I washed them, and now I see." And some of the Pharisees said, "This man is not from God, for he does not observe the Sabbath." Others said, "How can a man who is a sinner perform such signs?" And they were divided. So they said again to the blind man, "What do you say about him? It was your eyes he opened." He said, "He's a prophet." The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked him, "Is this your son who you say was born blind? How then now does he see?" His parents answered, "We know that this is our son, and we know that he was born blind, but we don't know how it is that he sees, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, "He's of age, go ask him." So, for the second time, they called the man who had been blind, and they said to him, "Give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner." He answered, "I don't know whether he is a sinner. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see." They said to him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered them, "I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples?" Whoa. Well, then they reviled him, saying, "You are his disciple? We are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as far as this man, we don't know where he comes from." The man answered, "Here's an astonishing thing. You do not know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but he does listen to one who worships him and obeys him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a person born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." They answered him, "You were born entirely in sins, and you are trying to teach us." And they drove him out. Jesus heard that they'd driven him out. And when he found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" He answered, "And who is he, sir? Tell me, so that I may believe in him." And Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and the one speaking with you is him, is he." He said, "Lord, I believe." And he worshiped him. And Jesus said, "I came into the world for judgment, so that those who do not see may see, and that those who do see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees were with him, and they heard this, and they said to him, "Surely we are not blind, are we?" And Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would not have sin. But now that you say we see, your sin remains." The gospel of the Lord. For God alone my soul waits in silence, for my hope is from him. He only is my rock and my salvation, my fortress. I shall not be shaken. Psalm 62, verse 5 and 6. Well, all around the world there are wars. For years now there's been a war in the Ukraine. The Russians are randomly killing civilians and turning beautiful towns into rubble because they think Ukraine belongs to them. In Gaza, there's a genocide going on right now of the Palestinian people. The Israeli government is systematically destroying all the buildings and killing civilians who are not combatants in what they say is self-defense. They certainly have need for self-defense because they're surrounded by a bunch of people who would like to kill them. And now the United States is at war again, bombing Iran. And this is the 250th anniversary of our nation, founded in a war of revolution. Since 1776, the United States has been involved in military conflicts for 230 years of its 250-year history. This includes declared wars, undeclared wars, foreign interventions, conflicts with Native Americans, the Indian Wars. This means that the United States has been at war for over 90% of its existence, with only 20 years of total peace. War and conflict is a part of human nature, not just for our nation, but around the world since time began. As soon as humankind was created, Cain killed his brother Abel. The first family. Personal violence is a war of a kind, and that has been going on forever as well. The readings today are about blindness and being in the dark. Ephesians 5, 8-14. Once we were in darkness, but now in the Lord in light. And John today, Jesus heals a blind man, provoking a hostile reaction. The healed man is thrown out, as I just read. Jesus comes, I'll repeat it. Jesus comes so that those who do not see can see, and that those who see may become blind. Jesus tells the Pharisees that if they were blind, they would not have sin. But since they say they see, their sin remains. They're a little too sure of themselves, maybe. War is a type of blindness, a blind rage. The old saying, seeing red, when all reason goes out the window, and it's fight or flight, fear, anger. Violence and war is blind to the pain it causes others and to the pain it causes oneself. Some people today use the Old Testament concept of holy war as a rationale for the war against Iran. In the Old Testament, the concept of holy war and Israel are linked as the Israelites gain the promised land and are constantly challenged throughout history by those who want to conquer Israel. Probably there's been no single group of people more persecuted than the people of Israel, because they were on the trade route, and all throughout history, all the bigger dogs would come and take them over throughout history. and so but they were promised the Holy Land. And so a lot of people use Old Testament concepts of holy war to justify that. The matter was made even more complicated in 1947 when, after World War II, the victorious Allies created the State of Israel for the Jewish people in Palestine. There's the people who have been victims of the Holocaust, 6 million people killed, and so they moved them back to Palestine. And that was a righteous thing to do for the Jewish people who suffered millions of deaths during the Nazi Holocaust. But this abruptly displaced the Palestinian people who were living there at the time and who have also lived there for thousands of years. So they've been at war about this ever since, continuing a conflict that actually goes back thousands of years. Fighting and fighting. As many of you know, Kim and I have 3 sons, and they have often had arguments with each other, as most families do. One Sunday when the kids were little, I preached a children's sermon about loving your neighbor. And I was later told by Kim that the 3 of them argued and fought and punched each other all the way home. They forgot. And I think a lot of people forget. Eventually, thankfully, they were reconciled to each other. Do you know the war in the Middle East is actually a family struggle between the descendants, the sons of Abraham? It's a sibling rivalry. The conflict in the Holy Land stems from the sibling rivalry between Abraham's sons Ishmael, son of Hagar, and Isaac, son of Sarah, originating in the book of Genesis. This foundational feud, fueled by Sarah's demand to banish Hagar and Ishmael, set up the long-standing struggle between their descendants in Israel and the Arab nations. And Christians get involved through Israel and the line of David, resulting in the birth of Christ. So the war today in the Middle East, as it has always been, is a sibling rivalry. Wouldn't it be nice if we could just put everybody in timeout? Put them on the steps for a while, and then maybe tell them to play nice? Or as my dad always said, fight nice, fight nice. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we all recognized that we are, in fact, truly brothers and sisters and could open our eyes, there you go, to the attempts at reconciliation instead of violence? This war is blind. If our eyes were opened, we would see that we are in the same family, that we are brothers and sisters, but people are blind. As Christians, the Apostle Paul says today in his letter to the church in Ephesus, in Christ we come out of the darkness and into the light. When Jesus was being captured in the Garden of Gethsemane, Simon Peter picked up a sword and cut the ear off of one of the guards. Jesus told him, put that sword away, and healed the man's ear. And while it is certainly true that war is sometimes justified, the history of the world and the history even of our country certainly shows that humankind is much too willing to go to war, and way too often does not use war as the last possible resort, but as a response to anger and fear. In other words, people respond not trusting in God. The prophet Isaiah advised King Hezekiah of Judah to trust in the Lord and not form alliances with former powers. As I said earlier, Israel was in the trade route, and they were always being threatened by powers to take them over. And in King Hezekiah's case, it was the kingdom of Assyria. And they were threatening to take him over. So King Hezekiah thought, maybe it would be a good idea to hook up with Egypt because they got a bigger army than we do, and maybe they can help us against these Assyrians. Well, Isaiah told the king to remain faithful to God. Don't do this because the people of Egypt worshipped another god, and just trust in the Lord and you'll be okay. Don't trust in Egypt and their God. Well, they didn't follow Isaiah's advice. This lack of trust in God resulted in the exile of 701 BC of over 200,000 people from the southern kingdom of Judah and the conquering of 46 fortified cities. Through the teachings of Jesus Christ, God gives all humankind today the same advice that Isaiah gives to King Hezekiah. Trust in God, not our own strength or earthly powers. Proverbs says it beautifully in the 3rd chapter of Proverbs. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. Lean not on your own understanding. My understanding is if we don't get going and bomb these people and kill all those people over there, that we're going to be in big trouble. That's my understanding. Trust, lean not on your own understanding. In all ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. The Pharisees in the gospel reading today throw the healed man out when the man tells them that Jesus is from God. Jesus is challenged to their own power, despite what they see with their own eyes, pun intended. Jesus speaks of spiritual sight. I came for judgment so that those who may see become blind, and those who do not see may see. And the Pharisees, well, surely we're not blind. We're the Pharisees. We're the righteous people. We obey the law. I mean, we're the good guys, Jesus. You know, you can't, certainly don't say that we're blind. Well, he said, yeah, you are. If you were blind, you would not have sinned, but now you say we see your sin remains. It's because everybody's a sinner, no matter how righteous they are in this life until Christ comes back again. You're a sinner, I'm a sinner, the Pharisees were sinners. Luther said we're saint and sinner at the same time. And so they just couldn't understand that they were sinners because they were the Pharisees. And Jesus said, no. Jesus is referring to spiritual sight. The vision to be able to trust in God when we are tempted to trust in ourselves and other worldly powers. Jesus heals spiritual blindness as well as physical blindness. He teaches us not always to trust what we see with our physical eyes, but to trust in him in the vision of God. To trust not always what we see with our physical eyes. If I took my glasses off and trusted in what I saw with my eyes, I probably wouldn't make it down the steps. Don't trust in what you see. Trust in the Lord. The lens of Jesus. Trust in God's vision. This too is kind of a sense similar to when Jesus was tested in the wilderness by the devil with the powers of this world, and he refused. Remember that? We're also called to resist the temptation to be violent or to go to war and trust instead in the Lord. So it's kind of like the devil's on our shoulder, you know, like when the devil tempted Jesus, you could jump off. You can have, I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world and all this kind of stuff. That's what we're tempted to do. Look, you know, we've got this really big army. Nobody can beat us, and we're kind of afraid of these guys. Let's just go take them out, you know. Let's just go do it. You know, come on, we can do that. No, we can do that. That, you know, that's the devil whispering in our ears. That's temptation. It's like the temptation of Christ. You follow me and I'll give you all the kingdoms of the world. People in their minds and hearts, follow your own advice and you'll have all the kingdoms of the world. But what is it if a man gains the world but loses his soul? And that's why we're to look at these things not with our eyes but with Jesus' eyes. War is blind. War is blind to the pain it causes others and the pain it causes oneself. We think we see, but we're blind. Only when we realize we cannot see and trust in God's vision and not our own will, we will have spiritual vision. My eyes have always been poor. I was born in 1951. My twin brother and I were put in what they called an incubator, which was filled with oxygen because we were very small and premature, and they figured you give them oxygen, your body would develop strong. What they didn't realize in 1951 was that oxygen was really damaging to your eyes. And I think sometimes they still, I don't know, Christy, they still use oxygen, but they cover people's eyes. Don't they even do that anymore? They cover the eyes, right? Yeah, for your eyes. Yeah, and so they didn't know that. So I have terrible vision because my eyes were exposed to oxygen in the incubator when I was just born. Recently, I got new glasses so that my increasingly poor vision could be better, and it is. But this past Wednesday at Bible study, I was reading out loud, and I mistook the number 5 for 15. So I told the class, yes, I got my new glasses so I can see better now. The point is, there's a limit to what we can see, no matter how much our eyes are corrected in the physical sense. There's a limit to what we can understand. War is an example of a failure to see with spiritual eyes. War is blind. Pray constantly that we all open the eyes of our hearts to God's presence. Trust in the Lord and lean not upon your own understanding. Amen.